Um, wait. Anatomy kilang-kilong. Oh, sorry, wala ko namatian.
Present.
Ah, okay.
Hello po.
Yes, yes. So, Austria, Abulancia, Bordamano, and Villarosa. So, Villarosa. Okay, si John Paul, wala siya signal. Okay, for those guys na wala signal, please tell your classmates nga i-access lang ang aton video. So, wala ko pa sila makong-upload. Pero if you can download it, pwede man dere or later, I will make time to upload it on YouTube. So, let's start. So first, our definition, disease and infectious disease. So what's the difference? A disease is any deviation from a condition of good health and well-being. Disease is a general term, while the infectious disease is a disease condition caused by the presence or growth of infectious microorganisms or parasites. So infectious disease, guys, may areta pathogenic microorganism. Ang disease lang is a general term. A disease can be diabetes, it can be um, high blood pressure, and an infectious disease is classified further into, for example, pneumonia. So it involves a microorganism or a pathogen. For pathogenic and virulence, pathogenicity is the ability of a microbe to cause a disease. This term is often used to describe or compare species of microorganism. So for the virulence, we have the degree of pathogenicity in a microorganism. So we've discussed it sa ating slide before. So virulence is the term used often to describe or compare strains within a species. So pathogenicity is the ability to cause a disease, and virulence is the severity of the disease or the degree of pathogenicity, the ability of the microorganism to cause a disease. So for example, sa ating pathogenicity, so our coronavirus is pathogenic, more pathogenic, that while our common cold is more virulent, because a common cold, di ba, hindi siya ma-detect, damo iya nga maapektuhan. And while coronavirus, since it is pathogenic, the symptoms are severe, and the government had already taken action para ma-stop or ma-fight off naton ang coronavirus. So in spreading a disease, um, it is better to have a more virulent or focus on the virulence first, kaya hindi na siya ma-detect. Though hindi siya ma-consider as worst as long as wala siya may cases of death or hindi gid alarming ang cases of death niya. While pathogenic, if a microorganism is pathogenic, that means lala siya. Iya nga intensity of causing a disease is closer to killing people easily. So that's the difference between pathogenic and virulent. Next one, we have acute infection versus chronic infection. So ang acute infection, guys, sudden onset, rapid progression, and severe symptoms. That's an acute infection. Sudden onset, rapid progression, severe symptoms. While the chronic infection would be delayed onset and slow progression. So chronic infection or chronic means long term. Acute, dali lang siya, and it would go away easily. So, for acute infection, example is common colds. Um, Common colds, and then we also have our pneumonia, so that's an acute infection. However, there are chronic infections such as STD, or the sexually transmitted diseases, the syphilis, the gonorrhea. They are chronic infection, or their onset is delayed because may patang incubation period. So syphilis can incubate for 15 years, and then magwa na iya symptoms after 15 years, 10 to 15 years.
Miss, present na ko, Miss.
Okay, noted, Mr. Ardenio. Sorry mo, hindi ka sagad sa team, so okay lang. I-review nyo lang guys for ang hindi makasunod. Next one, we have the primary and the secondary infection. Okay. For the primary infection, an infection that develops in an otherwise healthy individual. So, ang primary infection, healthy ka, na-infect, masakit. For the secondary infection, mayroon ka na daan masakit, tapos nag-develop lang siya, who is already infected with a different pathogen. So, sa primary infection, again, pneumonia, we can have that. However, sa secondary infection, we have, for those ang may mga diseases nga hina ilang immune system, for example, in cases with syphilis, for those with syphilis, guys, diba, their immune system is low, that they would usually acquire secondary infections such as pneumonia kung mag-arise na ila symptom. So that's primary and secondary infection. Primary infection, healthy ka, na-infect, you get sick. Secondary infection, sick ka na daan, then you got infected with another pathogenic microorganism, and you develop another disease. Next one, we have localized infection versus systemic infection. Localized, folks, so local, one area lang, or ara siya sa specific area. Systemic, it might involve different areas of the body or the whole body. So localized, restricted to a specific location or region, while systemic, spread to several regions or areas in the body of the host. So it can be several regions or your whole body is being infected. Clinical infection, an infection with obvious, observable, or detectable infection. While the subclinical infection, wala siya symptoms of infection. So, budlay siya i-detect ang subclinical infection. Clinical infection, it can be detected because may siya symptoms. So, sa mga chat nyo guys, okay, I can just read it. Okay, so, Mr. Gadicha. Next one, moving forward. We have the opportunistic infection, is an infection caused by microorganisms that are commonly found in the host's environment. This term is often used to refer to infection caused by microorganisms in the normal flora. So, opportunistic infection, example niya na atan mga Staph aureus, Staph epidermidis infection, staphylococcal infection. So, that's opportunistic infection. Next one, we have the emia, the suffix emia, meaning presence of an infectious agent or causing an infection, or you have an infection. That's emia. For example, bacteremia, presence of bacteria. Viremia, presence of infectious virus, and so on. Fungemia, fungi, emia, infectious fungus. Septicemia, infectious agent in the bloodstream, septic, sa blood, or sepsis. Itis, inflammation, guys. Pag may itis, inflammation. So, pharyngitis, inflammation of the pharynx. Endocarditis, inflammation of the heart chambers. And gastroenteritis, gastrointestinal tract inflammation. So that's the most common term, the emia and the itis. You need to remember that. Then the epidemiology is the study of the transmission of disease. Communicable disease is a disease that can be transmitted from one individual to another. Non-communicable, of course, it cannot be transmitted from one individual to another. Endemic. Endemic means a disease condition that is normally found in a certain percentage of a population. So it is normal in population, certain areas in the Philippines. So that's an endemic disease. The epidemic disease is a disease condition present in a greater than usual percentage of a specific population. Epidemic usually, pag nag-cover yan na most of the population of a country, that is called epidemic. Just like in China, di ba? The Wuhan, nang most of their people have already acquired the disease, so it's called epidemic. And for the pandemic, the coronavirus 2019, we have affecting large geographical area, often on a global scale. So global na iya transmission in iya nga